I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Thursday, November 17th, 2022. For me, I'm counting down to November 28th. That's my wife, Bobby's birthday. And so I'm trying to think of what I can do different and special. So anybody got any suggestions or ideas, pass them this way. My real thought is focusing on our anniversary in March 10th, and that'll be our 50th anniversary. So I want to do something special. I would love to. I'll just say this out loud. Maybe I can say it into existence. I'd love to have Bobby and for the two of us to go to Ghana, for example, and to renew our wedding vows in Ghana in Cape Coast. But you put it out there, see what happens with it, but something special. 50 years, a long time. I tell people it seems like we got married 2 weeks ago. And I so enjoy and I feel so lucky to have a chance to be in her life and that she's chosen to be in mine. And my number one job every day is to not get fired. That's the name of this game. So with that, while Thanksgiving is coming, that's what I'm thankful for in particular, is this relationship and the opportunity that I've had, the joy I've had in being in her life and around her. And all of the other friends, all the other people, I'm thankful for all the friends I have. And we call this show the Companion Show. And it's in the same spirit where some of us who've been friends for a long time and longer times get together and just kick it. My colleague and co-host and writing partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray, is here. Brenda, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm fine. It's cold, 17 degrees.
In New Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. I always think it's going to be hot there, but you're in the mountains, so that's why.
Yep.
And our colleague, Ndugu Yusef Mgeni, is here. Yusef is just a brilliant thinker and a brilliant spirit. Yusef, when I think of you a lot, I think about the phenomenal work you've among many things, but one is the phenomenal work that you did at KUOM. You did a Saturday broadcast. In fact, you brought me in to sub for you once or twice, kind of got me into radio. I think that was you that got me started in this. But you had visionary, futuristic, Afrofuturistic information, presentation, energy, enthusiasm, confidence. All of that was just flowing from you and the guest and the messages that you were bringing to the community. And you were doing things nobody else was doing. It was amazing. So I think of you in that light. I think about our collaboration together in creating the Twin Cities Black Communicators a lifetime ago. And of course, we both have been slugging it out here in the real world, trying to make a difference. And I think we have.
Thank you very much, Al. When I was on radio, I was tempted to say, be careful if you're driving because you might hit our other listeners. But in the back of my mind was an image of an automobile. And there were a husband and wife in the front seat. And then there were grandparents and grandchildren in the back seat. And the trick was, how do you communicate to everybody in that automobile at the same time and not discount or leave anybody out of the conversation, whether they had a PhD or a GED or whether, as Fannie Lou Hamer used to say, whether you're from Morehouse or no house, you're important in this discussion. And so we tried to communicate across generations, which was a skill that I actually picked up from a photographer, Chester Higgins Jr., whose father was the longtime photographer for the National NAACP. And Chester Higgins Jr., who has a website under that name, was a photographer for Look, Life, Time, USA Today. And he went to Africa 8 times, shot 1,000 rolls of film, and was only half finished with his book. And he's done a book on Black men called Drums of Life. He did one on the Black woman. He's done one on Black seniors. He is just such an incredible photojournalist that you can literally reach into the pages and feel the energy of his work. But thank you for the compliment, and I want to follow up by indicating that this is Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
And in terms of what's on my mind today, it's thanks. It's thanks to you for this effort, to Brenda for her writing and her friendship. It's thanks to all those people that voted, to those fathers who are being responsible and contributing to the welfare and the financial support for their children. It's thank you to those who keep our skies from falling. And I think you already began that tribute by saying Black women, okay, including Brenda. And I'm coming up on 52 years, and I don't know how I'm still alive, brother, because I talk in my sleep. So I really have to watch my step or I might not wake up. But to Black women, who have stood by us, as it's was said in the very beginning, through sickness and health and good times and worse. They've been right there on us, holding us accountable and pushing us out there. And I say thank you because those of us who have been a part of the struggle to improve the quality of life for people in the African American community have to be lovers, because a real revolutionary wants to make a better world, a better place for everybody in it. And we do this so that the community that our children are born into will bear more fruit and be more rewarding than the one that they inherited. And our parents did it for us. And it's part of that continuum within the Black family and within the Black community where we support not only ourselves, but the development of our replacements, future leaders, future people in our community, so that we don't just pass away and people come to a reception and tell lies about us and forget us, but so that they carry on the work that we begin, like the empire that you're building at Inside News, which has been out there forever, doing it, and at great personal cost and personal sacrifice. And the fact that you've not only given of yourself and blood, sweat, and tears, but financially and in terms of sharing and contributing to and supporting other people who are on this same journey within our community. So we need to pay thanks to all of those who not only made us possible, but make us possible. And, the cockroach is the oldest living thing on this planet, but we have not only survived, we are the most resilient people because we have survived and developed. And so I want to say thank you to us for not allowing us to backslide or to not go forward. So thanks to everybody who's been a part of that, for all of us.
I want to thank you, Yusef and Sean Lewis. You have been there for me. I've been writing for Al for over 2 years, and you have been there like walking encyclopedias and Googles. And, I'm still getting articles and whatever from Sean at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And I have predicted that Angela Rose and Sean will be in the White House one day if they choose to. They are just sharp young people. But I can't thank the two of you enough, because I was writing about cities that I'd never visited, knew nothing about the government, and just met so many fabulous people. Mm-hmm. Minneapolis has a lot to be proud of this day. Because
Brenda, I'm gonna tell you a secret. Al and I have something in common. Okay, the only things you keep are the things you share. Okay,
that's true.
And if they're not worth sharing, they're not worth keeping.
Yeah, okay. And he shared a lot and taught me a lot too. So it's good, and it's good that y'all are having that day. And when you see Senator Bobby Joe Champion, please tell him I said personally, congratulations. He's up there of favorite people's. He's so sharp. When he said he had 2 sons in college and he told them they were going to vote, I'm saying, my God, he looks like a college student himself.
He looks like a high school student.
I know. So it's so many people to be proud of.
Yeah.
I wonder if Keith Ellison is still partying.
Hakeem Adabudi, who was also known as Don L. Lee, used to say that the best teachers seldom teach. They bees and they do's. Okay, so thank both of you for your example, for being and for doing, because it's important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I see Irma is here, Dr. Irma McClaurin. Good to see you. Come on in. And I see my buddy Yoji, Maestri Yoji Adewale Sena is here joining us, as always, from Bahia in Brazil. And come on in. I wanted to ask everybody kind of to say what's on your mind, but the things that I want to hear about and talk about, listen to you about, are several. I'm excited to get Yusef's take on local elections here in Minnesota, what the trifecta means, and what the general successes, I think, in the legislative elections mean for our community. I wanted to ask Irma to talk about, because she's written 2 stories on it, Black Panther and Wakanda Forever. And
yes.
And I'm gonna frame them. I want the actual size, badass, and I'm going to frame those. It's fabulous.
And then we haven't had a chance to hear from Yoji on in depth on the changes happening in Bahia in Brazil with the success of the Lula presidential effort. So where that stands. So those are things that are on my mind. If Jonathan joins, I wanted him to talk about the fact that
I am. How you guys can hear me? Good.
We hear you. We hear you. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Because I am not. I'm having difficulties listening to you. I'm right now in a shopping center.
Okay.
In the food court, and well, Brazil, things are slowly changing. The hope is sinking in, but still there is a lot of people who are refusing to accept the outcome of the elections, and they are like camping outside of military barracks, protesting and imploring, and it's just like some kind of pathetic and delusional scenes that you see, people on their knees begging the military to intervene.
Is this equivalent to the January 6th? Is this equivalent to the January 6th crowd in Washington, D.C.?
Like an insurrection?
Is it equivalent?
Yeah, it's you could do a correlation. It has a little bit more of, I feel like it's those B comedies movies. Nobody really invaded with weapons nowhere, but they are outside of the barracks doing a show as they did cut out the interstate roads, and then in the end, I don't know if you guys see the image of one of the businessmen who refused to be dispersed. He got cleaned in the front of a truck, like eagle spread, dressed in the yellow and green shirt, and the truck driver just took over with him, like 4 kilometers, and that idiot, he was like, the face of these refuseniks. So still there is a lot of these people that are in the military barracks, but they are like now kind of folkloric figures, like delusional. But at the same time, yes, it's a correlation with the insurrectionists of the January 6th, because they do not accept, and the military to command release a communique that was kind of very ambiguous in what it said. And the good thing, one of the good things of these elections, it is that since October 30th, we don't hear anymore about Bolsonaro. He's nowhere to be seen.
Wow.
You know, he don't show up on TV, don't show to work. He's like depressed or something
Like a
in his
Trump.
bed or under his bed.
Yeah.
But as you saw yesterday, I don't know if you have time to follow the speech of Lula at the COP conference in Egypt, where he was acclaimed by the public, and he declared that Brazil is bad. So,
Hmm.
as far, for example, the climate issue, a lot of things gonna be done with the leadership of Lula. He also was able to get some kind of legislation through his transition government cabinet to free up a very big chunk of money to make sure that people will keep receiving the 600 reais of it's like a food stamp kind of program that they receive a month that was promised by Bolsonaro in hopes of
Keeping the
persuade
election.
the
Yeah.
Lula voter or the most
Right.
poor people to vote on him, but and he was not successful, and
Yoji, when does the
he
actual
promised that
transfer
and
of
didn't
power
have the
take
funds
place?
to it. Huh?
When does the actual transfer of power take place? Is Lula actually
It's
in office
January
already?
1st.
January 1st. So between
Yeah.
election and now, Bolsonaro is just gone, not coming to work or anything.
Yeah, up to today, from the October 30th, is nowhere to be seen. No social media presence. He don't show up at the palace to do stuff. He's like mute.
Well, maybe he's taking his vacation time that he stored up. Let me
Oh,
let me
I
shift a
don't
little.
know. Maybe he's embarrassed or really
Yeah.
depressed.
Yeah, I'm being facetious, obviously. Let me shift and bring Yusef in. Yusef, politics. So we made the reference of what's happened in Brazil to the insurrection, but the big issue right now nationally is Trump's decision that he's going to run for president again. That happened a couple of nights ago. What does it mean from where we sit, where we stand, Yusef? What are your thoughts?
Well, 50% of the Republicans support Trump no matter what. 10% are independents and are
No, but
blatantly opposed to his reelection. And 40% are getting off the bus. So there's a very strong likelihood, given the chaos, the division, and the infighting within the Republican Party. Major donors are backing up. People who have been endorsed are staying away. The election deniers who were endorsed by Trump did not fare well at all in terms of their election or reelection. And Trump may very well implode or self-destruct. If he does not receive the nomination, he could very well run as an independent and destroy and bring down the Republican Party with his own demise. I think that the likelihood of more competitors for the Republican endorsement or the Republican nomination are going to pop up like dandelions, in the neighbor's yard in the very near future. We already have a handful of Republicans who have announced or who are preparing to announce that they plan to run for president. They're not afraid of the president or his indictments or attacks. And, when you look at what happened in Arizona, what happened around the country to some of the, there were 291 election deniers who were nominated for statewide or national office. And that's 3 out of 4 Republicans who were running for election or reelection. And only 170 of them who were in strong Republican districts where a Republican was bound to win regardless were reelected. So half of them went down the drain. And the Republican Party learned finally that they didn't need Trump in order to be elected or in order to win the races in which they had sellable, positions and some modicum of reality and respect. Now, Trump is going to be Trump. There's no change in that whatsoever. I think the greater the likelihood that he will not receive the Republican endorsement increases the possibility that Joe Biden, strictly because of age, may not want to run for reelection. And there seems to be a lot of discussion about that, whether it's warranted or whether it's just wishful thinking will remain to be seen. Here in Minnesota, the governor won by 8 percentage points. The governor and the lieutenant governor, Tim Walz, are African-American Muslim attorney general for the state of Minnesota, won re-election as the incumbent attorney general by less than 1%. And that is after the Republican Attorney Generals Association spent more money on lying attack ads against him than his opponent had in his campaign chest. And in fact, his opponent, as you pointed out last week, Al, is under investigation by the Campaign Finance Board because the Republican Attorney Generals Association is one of those Citizens United special interest PACs, and the candidates are not supposed to have anything to do with them. And the Attorney General, Ellison's opponent for Attorney General, actually lined up the ad buys for the Republican Attorney Generals Association, RAGA. I guess it was supposed to rhyme with MAGA. I don't know. But we do have a trifecta to the degree we are one of only 2 states in the country that has a bipartisan, bicameral legislature, where we have a separate House and a separate state Senate who both have to go to conference committee and agree on whatever legislation is forwarded to the governor. And the Democratic Party won a majority of the seats in the House of Representatives, in the state Senate, and of course the governor and lieutenant governor were reelected. So it is smooth sailing for the most part for the Democratic Party in the state of Minnesota. But Keith Ellison's opponent for Attorney General pointed out that he won 76 of the 87 counties in the state of Minnesota. They just happened not to be the most densely populated counties, which, and I'll say one final thing. 4 years ago, the governor received 6 percentage points of the total vote more than his opponent and more than Keith Ellison received for Attorney General. And Keith won going away in a field with multiple candidates. This year, the governor won by 8 percentage points more of the total electorate than did the Attorney General, Keith Ellison. And Keith Ellison only won by, as I said, less than 1/2 of a percentage point. So we've got to figure out a way to get Black men out to the polls, because Black women are continuing to take the lead and show us the way, and get out there and vote early, vote by mail, get in line, do whatever it takes, get a babysitter, take the kids with them to the poll to make their mark. And 12% of Black men voted for Trump when he ran the second time for president. So we've got some work to do. But
Irma, what do you make
Rena,
about this?
Rena Moran ran for 4th district on the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners. St. Paul is the capital city. We are one of the few states where the capital city is in the largest urban area. So literally the state capital is across the street from the boundary of the hood, Summit University in St. Paul, Rondo, Selbydale, whatever you want to call us. And we have all 3 of the governing interests, the governor, the Senate, and the House. Rena Moran got 81% of the vote, which was the highest percentage of anyone running for election or re-election as a county commissioner. She ran to replace Tony Carter, who is the mother of the mayor in the capital city, Melvin Carter. And and also today is the first day of the term of our new chief of police in St. Paul, Chief Axel Henry, who is well respected both within the police department and within the African American and other communities of color. I attended a reception last night in his honor, and it was beautiful to see African Americans, Caucasians, Somalis, Hmong, Native Americans, and a real representative, I don't want to say collection, but appearance
Assembly, yeah.
of diverse ethnic communities here in St. Paul. And he has an incredible track record, a long-standing relationship with the NAACP. And his wife is a sister who is the director of the New Rondo Land Trust in St. Paul. So some very deep roots and connections within and across communities of color and the white power structure and the police department. And we look forward to a continued relationship. And for some reason, I know that Minneapolisans have been very jealous of our relationship because three of our last four chiefs of police have been African American, who came, two of whom came right out of our community. And we had an exceptional relationship, working relationship, not just public relations ship. And we look forward to continuing and further developing that relationship. Minneapolis is developing a compact between the community and the police department following the murder of George Floyd 2 years ago. We have had a compact which we negotiated with the assistance of the Justice Department with the St. Paul Police Department dating back to 2001. And we just signed an addendum to that compact because we've had body-worn cameras, military equipment, changes in technology, in policing, in the law and public policy. And so we created an addendum that we worked on for 2 years to update our compact with the police department, the city of St. Paul, the city attorney, the human rights department, the police community internal affairs advisory committee, and other entities. And so we look to continue the regular meetings that are built into that agreement and the very strong relationship. And I'd be happy to share a copy of it with the folks in Minneapolis if it would aid in your efforts to create a compact over there.
Sure.
Yusef, I would say that there really needs to be I don't think that many people know that such a kind of agreement exists. And I think, writing about it and really profiling what has been accomplished as a result of that would really be important, because most people are struggling with defund the police or fund the police, but redirect money to mental health. So I think people are looking for models, and it sounds like you have a great model there that I think is important, that more visibility be given to it.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not a problem.
So I'd love to see a copy of it. Yes, send me a copy.
Will do, Irma.
Dr. Irma, take that as a point of departure and give me your thoughts on Trump, the elections as you read them in Minnesota, but also what happened in Brazil.
And Wakanda.
What's the vibe? What's the connection globally? What's the spirit of change look like to you right now? And is it that a progressive agenda continues to unfold that advances humanity, or is it that we're in the contest that never ends between the potential for extinction and the effort to grab and control global domination, global power by right-wing militaristic forces? How do you read it from where you are as an anthropologist and educator?
Wow, that's a lot. I would say there are a couple of things that come to mind. One is that the struggle between, sort of conservative and progressive is an ongoing struggle. And I think we're going to be engaged in that battle for a long time. I think what's really at stake in the United States of America is this idea of has democracy reached its, has it reached its limit? And we have people like the 45th and his allies who hate big government, but are doing everything they can to become part of big government so they can dismantle big government, or as they call it. And I think we have to be very, very conscious that this is very deliberate to take over. People need to, I was talking to a woman from the Caribbean, from Guyana, and she was saying how she was saying to her grandson, you have to vote, because what's at stake here is not just like the big, presidential election, but that on the scale, as Minnesota has shown us, that on the local scale, that what happens in those local cities and counties at the state level really does matter. So people have to get out and vote for judges. They don't realize that Donald Trump had stacked the courts in terms of the appointments that he made. And these are the people who are then going in and stopping things like, President Biden's debt forgiveness. They're putting blocks in. So every election matters, and it needs to be seen that way. On a global scale, I think everybody is waiting to see what's going to happen with the former president. Is he going to be successful? I say we should sit back and let the Republicans battle it out and say nothing and do nothing and let them have their own in-house fighting and not become part of the diversion. Because if we jump in and critique him, then it gets diverted to us and our critique, as opposed to just watching them decide, are they going to let the Republican Party implode under Donald Trump, or is there going to be a new direction? And any direction is going to be better than what currently is there, So, but that gets me to two things. I'm thinking of writing a piece about what the hell are we going to the moon for? This notion of expansionism and colonialism and the need to possess is really a disease in this country. Wow. We don't need to go to the moon to merely mess it up because we've already screwed up this planet. I mean, what are people going to do to the moon? They're going to land stuff on there that won't disintegrate. So suddenly the moon is going to become the junkyard of this country, the playground of the rich, because the only people who are going to be able to afford to take that trip to the moon are going to be people with tremendous wealth. And so it's going to become like, what this dystopia that we often see played out. Do they not watch those science fiction films that already show us when we go through expansionism, what we do is slash and burn. We destroy whatever is there. We put something in place that ultimately is going to turn into junk, and there's no win in any place. And so for me, I guess part of why I was inspired by Wakanda is that women are still badass. It was wonderful to see Angela Bassett get her day of glory in terms of being a central figure in the beginning, because I feel like she's an actress who has been underrated. What she did with Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do with It, what she's done with her roles, and she's been very careful about what role she chooses. I think she has tremendous power, and that power comes through from her gentleness through her anger, comes through in this particular version. So I've kind of wrapped myself in a Wakanda Forever universe, in the sense that it is inspirational, aspirational. It is showing us that, one, the issues about can Black people govern themselves are still at play. That scene with her in the United Nations and the confrontation with what is basically predominantly white, governments, basically says, we know that you're after our stuff, and you're after our stuff because you fear us, that we're going to use it against you, which whenever Blacks have been in power, we've never done, right? So it really is a kind of white projection onto us. But we also then see them getting their butts kicked, by the Dora Milaje. And I think it is just having the range of women in there, from, the elegant queen to the nerdy princess, who then becomes, the wise person. And as I say, and of course the Dora Milaje. And I have to say that the woman who plays Okiyo actually spent time in Grinnell, Iowa. Her father was on faculty there when I was there, and I was like, whoa, such a connection. I think the most difficult part for me was watching the conflict between the indigenous people and Black. And I think it represents in some ways what's happening in the real world. I think the tension between Latinos and Blacks is very real. And at some point, we need to find a way to come together for a common good, because our enemy is not us and each other, but it's out there. And so, it took a lot of fighting, and that was hard to see, because it's two people of color fighting each other, right? But in the end, I think that resolution, even if it's an unsteady one, was one that was very powerful, is that we have to find alliances, in that sense. So I loved it. I was so proud to be there, and just like, I'm just like Wakanda forever.
Dr. Irma, what about the Viola Davis movie? Have you seen that?
Absolutely. People are, and I think it's a wonderful movie. It has elements. Part of what I think people find difficult is that it's rooted in a real situation and real facts that some feel they weren't as true to the facts as they could have been. But I think, again, it's powerful. What comes across to me is the gender dynamics that is recognized by these women warriors, that the men warriors that they fight alongside of can actually have wives and children, and the women cannot. And the fact that the primary character has to hide the fact that she was pregnant, abused, through rape, but that she has to hide that fact shows the sort of, problematics of this sort of gender dynamics. So they're powerful on one hand, and yet they still have a kind of containment, things that they can't do precisely because they're women on the other hand. I think they're both powerful for very different reasons, in that sense.
Thank you.
I see Representative Ruth Richardson is here backstage. Bring her in. Representative, how are you? Congratulations, first of all, and good to see you again. And jump right in the conversation. I want to hear particularly your take on what it means for the trifecta, what it means for the phenomenal advances of the BIPOC caucus in the state legislature, but particularly what it means for I think 3 Black women in the Senate. Huge. That's huge.
First time.
First time. And of course, I'd love your take on Wakanda and how do we relate, the visioning power of the big screen as a motivating and guiding influence. How do we actualize the spirit of possibility that films like that bring to us? What do you think?
Wow. Well, I'll start with the legislature, because there's a magic in these numbers. To have not 1 but 3 Black women in the Senate for the first time in the state's history. And looking across in the other chamber within the House, our Posse Caucus, as it's known, our People of Color and Indigenous Caucus, now has 20 members, and it is the most representation that we have had within the history of this of the state as well. And to put it into perspective, in the House, there's 134 seats, so we've got 20 out of 134. Which makes history, but there's room You know, there's room for more of that as well. And I think what you're really referring to in this moment is that hope of what's possible, because you know, coming off of a really stressful election in many ways. I heard a bit of the conversation before with talking about what really is at stake in our state, what's at stake in our nation. And I mean, we're talking not only about democracy, like our very democracy being at stake, but the recognition of our humanity, which was already not universal, going backwards on that as well. And so what I have really, you know, what I was really struck by in days, weeks, and months following the leak of the Dobbs decision, when the Supreme Court decision leaked, when I read through that, to me, what I really saw was a roadmap of going back in time, right? And thinking about what are the rights that we have viewed as settled that we're going to start now to roll back. And not just about bodily autonomy and reproductive choice, but they're coming for marriage equality. They're talking about undoing Brown versus Board of, you know, education, and so within these spaces, what we have really begun to see is that the polarization has really increased. And so within this moment and within this time that we have, we need to seize this. We need to grasp this time. And we need to ensure that all the steps that we are taking are steps with purpose, and steps for ensuring that we are building a better future and a better opportunity than what we're experiencing today, because we know how quickly things can change, and we've seen the roadmap.
Representative Richardson, let me ask you this, and in the spirit of what you just said, we know that there's $10 billion on the table right now in St. Paul. $10 billion that the governor could not get out during the last legislative session because of obstruction by the Republicans who hoped to take control of the governor's office and to redirect the money in ways they saw fit. But now, with control of the House and the Senate and the governor still being in control, what can and should happen? And the big question is, what do we tell our people about how to line up, organize, and to claim the resources we need? Now, what's important is that as often as not in the past, as soon as an opportunity like this arises, you find division, intentional, organized, planned. It's like the playbook: divide them, throw them a small bone, let them all go fight for it. So how do we avoid that and make sure that we don't leave what is ours there for somebody else to use and determine how it's going to be used? What do you think?
You're asking all of the right questions, and the decisions that are being made right now around what are going to be those priorities, like that is work that has been going on. So when we're not in session, there's conversations that are happening within the interim. And so I think the opportunity that we do not want our community to pass by is we need to show up. We need to speak up. And again, that recognition. And I always tell people, like, the Capitol is your house. It's the people's house. And it's going to be really important that the pressure is kept on. There's going to be a lot of voices, in the coming weeks as we're going into start session around what should the priorities be. And so having convenings, I think, is going to be really important. I know the Black Caucus, the UBLC, the United Black Legislative Caucus. We want to hear from, community. We want to hear about the things that are really important, and also understanding with everything that is on the table right now, being able to get a real feel from those in the community, like what is going to have the most impact for you and your life. There's a lot of big bills that people are talking about. They're talking about paid family and medical leave. They're talking about recreational marijuana, and also looking at ways to ensure that those who have been convicted can see some amnesty. And then when you think about what it means to start a whole cannabis industry in the state, how do we ensure that those who have been harmed by these policies disproportionately are also in line to benefit? Because what we have seen so often, individuals are jailed, they're criminalized, and then people who don't look like us come in and get wealthy at the end of this. And so, I mean, those are some of the really important conversations that need to happen. And to your point, it's the collective voices and ensuring that people are showing up in community to have those hard conversations to represent us well at the Capitol.
Your conversation is giving me the idea, and I'm ask my colleagues and friends here, my companions, it would be kind of cool to originate this program from the state capitol for several weeks in a row, just as one of the focal points of making visible this idea of the Capitol being the people's house. Angela Rose is here. Angela, what do you think? Good to see you, my friend. And you've been monitoring the conversation. Jump in wherever you want to in response.
I absolutely agree with Representative Richardson. And one of the things that I think that we need to focus on is, because our rights, as we've seen the Supreme Court overturn them, we need to work on fundamentally institutionalizing them on the state level. So just because we have these rights that we are comfortable with, that we acknowledge, just like abortion rights, that can be easily overturned. And so on the federal level, so as a state, we need to look at how can we make sure we institutionalize these through this legislative session. And we have a great opportunity to do that. And then also, this is something that the kids say, right? Is like, we need strong folks, representatives who are going to fight at the core to make sure that our rights are ensured. So we need shooters, right? Like, we need sharks. We need people who are not going to twiddle their thumbs with policies that, might fit around the edges or might impact like middle-class folk. We need folk who are going to represent all of our interests and protect all of our rights and focus on these issues that impact the lives of the average everyday Black person, as well as the average everyday low income person, worker, laborer, not just, some of these opportunity legislation or opportunity policies that, yes, can build and do a lot, for certain areas and certain folks, but really make sure that our rights that we cannot, we cannot guarantee will be there for us. Like, you're talking about same-sex marriage, you're talking about abortion rights, women's rights, interracial marriage rights. These are issues that are going to be on the federal and the state and the Supreme Court's agenda. So this is exactly what we need to do on the state. Is we need shooters, we need folks who are strong, who are going to propose these bills that are directly impacting our lives, and not as much of the superfluous bills, especially when we have a trifecta this year.
Irma, you raised some questions about, do we ever own Twitter for this show? We're going out to Twitter, Facebook, to YouTube. The YouTube channels are two. One is Black Press USA and Insight YouTube. We're going out to LinkedIn, and we're going out to Twitter. I'm not sure if I think it's the Insight Twitter, and it could be the personal Al McFarlane Twitter as well. But we, the question you raised, Dr. Irma, is a good question. It's about how do we maximize our engagement, right? Is that what you're saying? I can't hear you. Unmute if you would.
Yes, what I was saying is that I think the work that we did with UROC under the ARA grant, we funded 11 community computer centers. The multimedia consortium was brought in to run stories. And I think looking at replicating that kind of work and looking at how we can build the capacity. For example, I would like to see money go to re-entering citizens who've actually designed programs, but often what happens is that they come up with the idea and then some agency takes it over and they never get credit for it. But they're really in the best position to help people because they've changed their lives around, to help people who are re-entering society. Like, what are the ways and what's going to be, the barriers that get put in front of you, or what's going to be sort of those things that might entice you to go back. And I think there has to be a way to make sure that that money doesn't just go to these, nonprofits that are doing good work, but actually puts it in the hands of re-entering citizens so that they can do, the work that they really want to do, which is to make sure that others get set on the right path. And, we have our friend, who's always been doing that, who used to run alternatives, And so I just like to see something like that happen. But I think that there are models out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just say, how do we replicate it and make sure that this time it's more sustainable than it was before?
Let's do that. Let's do that. Representative Richardson, I was going to ask you, what is your sense of the difference it makes that Senator Bobby Joe Champion is now the president of the Senate? And you mentioned earlier that there are 20 now in the caucus, right? I remember when it was just Bobby and just Jeff Hayden and just Bobby in the House. And then when they moved to the Senate, just two of them. So it's been a long, long time coming. But the change is, though it's 20, it's huge. And it's a sign of what's to come, I believe, because last week or week before last, we had Waming Mua, my colleague from Hmong Today, in a conversation with Bob Bogle, who is the editor and publisher of the Philadelphia Tribune, and with James Washington, who's the CEO of the Atlanta Inquirer, I think. Is it Atlanta Inquirer? Atlanta Voice is what it was, yeah. That group was all on talking about and analyzing the election. And so the initial thought I had to ask you, though, Representative, was Bobby Joe Champion as the president of the Senate, and this general movement of more of us being in position of broadening the pipeline, creating a bench, many benches that bring many candidates and potential winners forward. What do you think?
I mean, that's exactly what's happening right now. I mean, you talked about, Bobby Joe, Senator Champion, Senator Hayden, being alone. Representative Moran was in the House for a long time, by herself as well. And I think what we really have before us for the first time in the state's history is the ability for there to be more than one of us at all of these tables, because so often what happens, there's all of these tables where decisions are being made and priorities are, and you're trying to figure out how to be in all of these spaces. And to be the voice for entire communities. And so the ability to be able to build a bench is great. But what's even better is as a third term member going in, the institutional knowledge that begins to grow in terms of how to get things done. And and as a member with within 2 terms who's had more than 34 bills passed, it's also the ability, as people are coming behind, to pass that knowledge on. And I think one of the big opportunities that we have right now, because this whole idea of how do we create something that isn't a one-time traumatic stop in a community, like we'll float in, fund you, and then go away, is to use the strategy that others have been using. You got to get in the governor's base budget, because if you get in the governor's base budget, you don't have to come back year after year asking and begging for funds. It becomes something that is automatic. And so it's with more of us here, more of us in a place to demystify what's going on at the Capitol, we have a tremendous opportunity to make real impact.
What is the environment like for you as a Black woman at the Capitol? What has it been? Has it changed? And I say that because I know that some people still suggest that there's a certain arrogance that borders on cultural chauvinism. That's putting it politely, I think, but I've heard this from other people and women in particular. How do you describe the environment, and then how do you withstand or just not be affected by, proceed despite what they are doing? Because at the end of the day, that's only relevant if it stops you.
Yeah, I would just say that being in the Capitol as a Black woman, oftentimes it can feel like two modes. Either you're invisible or you're a threat. And so that's sort of the space that I feel that from my perspective that I have felt within this space. And so the question that you ask is a really important one, because a lot of these spaces are really hard to be in. They wear on you personally. They can wear on your mental health as well. And there is, in fact, strength in numbers. So to be able to have individuals within that space and not be alone, and to be able to have that ability to rely and support each other is really important. And also outside of the Capitol, externally, your communities, your people that you can go to, who can be a huge support as well, because these are some of their hard jobs, they're thankless jobs, and you're in a space of where in many ways you make yourself a target, right, by being up here. And there's also the recognition as one member out of 134. There's nothing that I can do alone within the Capitol. You have to, everything in the Capitol is a numbers game. You have to have the numbers, and you also have to have the relationships to be able to get to the numbers in order to make things happen.
David Rabb, my friend, who's a veteran, has joined the program. We're almost out of time, but David, good to see you. And I want to say, so good to see you, in part because we're just coming out of Veterans Day, and it's a time to honor and acknowledge men and women who've served the country in the military. Colonel David Rabb served as the commander of a mental health or psychological services unit doing combat work both in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and has a phenomenal story of serving the country, serving and saving the lives of people he was charged to lead and to work with, but also working on behalf of veterans here after his military career. Brother David, good to see you, man.
It's great speaking with you. Can you see me, or
yes?
Are we
see you and hear you.
All right.
We're almost out of time, but
just real quick,
you jumped on. Yeah.
Let me be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. Here, I think we need to take a knee and take time to dream, to just dream, and come up with action items, right, based on the dream. It is hard, very hard, to kill an idea. It's very hard to kill, as we know, Martin Luther King, a dream. So what I'm just cautioning right now is, before we move into what's next, we take a knee and think about the future. Think about our kids. Think about the elderly, right? And just dream our way to it. Not work our way to it, not suffer our way through it, but dream.
I love that. Irma, is that what Wakanda does for us?
Absolutely. He
I mean, that's
the words right out of my mouth, is that it represents, a world that we can dream, that we can imagine. And we see how it manages itself, how its work is about making sure that its people and its citizens are taken care of. And I think it's that kind of care that we need to see in the real world. So if there are lessons to be learned from Wakanda, it's like, how do we cherish and dream and take care of ourselves at the same time that we are also dealing with the forces that are outside, that are always out for us in that respect. I mean, Representative, Robinson, what she talked about was the fact that you're either seen as this angry Black woman or you're a threat. I mean, I know it personally. I encountered that at the University of Minnesota,
Yep.
And I think that that is a real challenge. I'm actually working on a piece, Al, to be coming that asked, did Biden actually abandon Black women? Did he do enough for us in this election? Should we have had a Black state senator in North Carolina? Should there have been a Black woman governor in Georgia? Had he done more, perhaps? And people are saying he's abandoned Kamala. She is like so invisible as to not even be there. So I think we need to call him and hold him accountable.
What do we think? I'm going to go over a couple of minutes here about the question you raised, Yusef, about whether Biden will see his way to continuing or not continuing if the threat of Donald Trump is not there. What does that mean for Kamala Harris? And, conventional wisdom, vice president becomes a candidate for president. I don't know for sure that the party's going to be conventional. We know that they have the capacity to change, the game whenever there's a chance of not being able to win as they perceive a win to be. But what do you think? How does the fact that Kamala Harris is a Black woman and vice president figures in that equation, both within the DFL and in the bi-party system as well?
Well, I think that Dr. Irma hit it on the head, because Kamala has been invisible, and Kamala has some prosecutorial baggage from her tenure as district attorney and state's attorney general in California that sent a lot of young Black men up the river.
3 strikes.
But she has not been positioned to become a presidential nominee. And I think it was more a function of putting someone in positional leadership than actually leadership responsibility. And, we're talking about the legislative discussion. The first responsibility of leadership is to train your replacement.
Cool.
And in terms of the issue that has the most significant impact on our future here in Minnesota, we have one of the largest achievement gaps between Black students and white students who are not eligible for free and reduced price lunch in the country. And that's an indictment, along with the mass incarceration of African-American men, women, and people of color against the future of our community. And if we don't get out in front of these two curves, it is going to weigh down any categories of possibility or dreams that we might have for the future of our community. We absolutely have to make education and mass incarceration two of our top priorities in terms of public policies, in terms of philanthropy, and in terms of parenting within our community. So Pamela is a question mark, and I'm not certain that Pamela has been set up for anything but failure, one and done, vice president. And I don't know even that Kamala would be in a position to be considered as vice president for whoever does get the Democratic nomination, whether it's Biden or whether it's someone else. So it's a sad testimony. Sometimes we need to be careful what we wish for, because we might get it. Okay. And we got a Black woman vice president finally, and she absolutely has been limitless in terms of any access to power or possibility.
Limited. Angela, I know what a glass ceiling is. What's a glass cliff?
So Yes, a glass cliff is what I see Kamala on. It's a situation in which women are promoted to higher positions during times of crisis or duress. And this is when, in times when chance of failure is more likely. So I see her in a position where even in the times that we have seen her, it was when there was a crisis going on and she was trying to manage it, or she was being lambasted by the media for not managing it. And so that's kind of the position that I see her in. And it's really when you elevate women and people of color into higher positions during these crises, when there's higher chance of failure, you're doing it just for the representation, right? The more for the institution than the person, right? To safeguard the status quo of the institution than to actually fundamentally radically change an institution for more representation. So this is one of those instances I see Kamala Harris in.
And I call it
Dr.
miracle work. You know,
Dr. Irma,
that,
do you see,
you know,
is there a scenario where she becomes the nominee from your point of view, Dr. Irma?
I think people are talking about, unless she goes and backtracks and tries to resolve the baggage that she carries with her in terms of her contribution to this prison pipeline, to mass incarceration, she's got to come out with a different stand. She's got to have some reflection that she's looked at things. She now sees things differently. You know, she understands the significance. She has to say she's sorry. You know, but other than that, it's going to be very hard to do that. But she's been basically invisible.
I mean, on Twitter, I will say this is that the last week, they've been posting a lot of pictures of her laughing and people love it. Her laugh is infectious and that'll probably up her likability. But, you know, likability, though, is a aspect of winning elections. It's not everything, because I agree with you 100%, Dr. Irma, that she needs to come hard on some policy as well.
Right.
Listen, we're out of time. Thank you all so very, very much. It's always a joy and a pleasure and enlightening for me to be with you. To our listeners and viewers, like, share, let people know that we're here. Join us. We'd love to have you participate in any way that you can, both watching, listening, or being on the panel. Check us out. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.